Okay, sorry for the little delay, everybody. And sorry for the mess that I look like, but this was one of those last minute things that I decided to do um, kind of at the last second after I got off from work. I thought, well, I'll do a little live stream, but I wanted to see how it would do in the middle of the week as opposed to the end of the week or the weekend. Um, I don't plan on this being a very long live stream, but I hope some people will come by and join me. Um, Again, little housekeeping stuff to get out of the way before I get started. I do have the Patreon up and running. If anybody is interested in joining that, the link to the Patreon is on the Seductive Poison page. I plan to eventually add it to these videos, but I just ain't gotten around to it. Been kind of busy with different things. But if you're not interested in joining Patreon or you don't want to join right now and you still want to support what I'm doing, you can donate through my PayPal email address, which is located in the upper left hand corner. It's evil.dead.chick1976 at gmail.com. It doesn't have to be a lot. It could be a couple of bucks here and there, whatever you can give, if you want to, will help in a lot of ways. Probably would help me invest in some new equipment maybe for doing these streams, or um, just different things all around to make these more professional in the future. Um, but again, that's not something that you have to do. Um, it can certainly be, uh, like I said, it doesn't have to be done. I'll keep doing these as long as I can, regardless. But if you do, feel the need to donate to my cause, or my endeavors, rather, it's not really a cause, then feel free to do that. But I'm going to go ahead and get started. Um, like I said, this was really super quick that I decided to do this, so I don't know if there will be anybody in the chat. I'll be glad if there's people in the chat, but um, I don't really expect a lot of people, so if any. But I'm going to go ahead and get started with what I was going to talk about during this live stream, which is television horror, namely the anthology type series, or the ones that told stories from writers, or just maybe they were original screenplays for a little um, show. Basically horror episodic television. Um, and there's a lot of different ones that you can talk about. Um, going way back into the 50s and 60s and stuff with the old Twilight Zone episodes. But what I really want to concentrate on is the ones from my youth when I was growing up, the ones that I remember. Um, and then I may, at the end, compare them to some of the more recent um, sort of television slash cable horror things that have come out. So I'm going to go ahead and get started here with one of my personal all-time favorites. This is one I go back to quite often when I'm feeling nostalgic. Is Tales from the Darkside. And you can see I've got the first season here. Actually, I've got all of the seasons as they came out on DVD a few years back. And I was so excited when they came out because this is really a series that I remember really fondly um, growing up with. Um, And it actually, I didn't realize it, but it wasn't on but maybe four four seasons or so, um, which is really a short run when you compare that with like a lot of sitcoms that go 7, 8, 9, 10 series, um, or something that an animated thing like The Simpsons or South Park, that I think both of those are still going on now, and I don't know, I don't even know what season they're into now. So when you compare it with stuff like that, that's a really short run. Uh, and I will be honest that when it got towards the end of its run, it seemed like they were kind of scraping the bottom of the barrel for stories. The stories weren't as good. There were a few. There were a handful in the last series or two that were um, decent. But the ones that really stand out for me were in the earlier seasons. Seasons 1 and 2, I'd say probably had the best stories. Um, and this is when people were. This is prior to Stephen King's stories being turned into a lot of miniseries. Like his novels, like It and The Stand, the Tommy Knockers, uh, Storm of the Century. Different. I think Storm of the Century though was actually a original screenplay he wrote, but It and The Stand and The Shining, Tommy Knockers, like I said before, those um, were some of the ones that I remember growing up. Actually, The Stand came out um, the my last year of high school, I believe, 1994, and that's the direction the Stephen King material moved into. I mean, you had Salem's Lot in the 70s, but in the early to mid 80s, when stuff like Tales from the Dark Side was on, there weren't really a big Stephen King miniseries coming out every year or so. That time had not come. I think the time that it really started was like 1990, when it was like the big miniseries thing. But back in the Tales from the Dark Side days, and Twilight Zone from the 80s, which I'm going to talk about here in a little bit, a lot of Stephen King's short stories were used in these. And those are some of my favorites because I'm a huge Stephen King fan. So um, I like, you know, I like his stuff slightly more than some of the other stuff. It's not that I don't like some of the other stories, because I'm going to talk about a few of my favorites in Tales from the Dark Side, which one of them, um, well, actually, the Trick or Treat episode, which is the first episode on the first season, is a real good opener for the series in general. Um, and it's basically there. It takes place in. These don't take place in the same time. Like, they don't take place always in the present day, which would have been the 80s back when this came out. Sometimes they take place in uh, older time periods, and this one in particular did. You can tell by the clothes that people were wearing and stuff like that. This one came out, the original air date was October 29th, 1983. And basically, this rich old guy that everybody in the town owes him money. He owns a store, and everybody's got IOUs, so he could probably take their land or whatever at any time. So there's the whole town is basically indebted to him. So every Halloween, he gives the kids a chance to come to his house and find the IOUs for their parents. And if they do, he'll forgive all of them. And but the kids keep coming year after year after year, and no, and he succeeds in scaring them off with all these little tricks that he's set up in his house. So he's just a mean old miser. And basically, this is like the old. It reminds me of the old EC comics, because the guy gets his comeuppance uh, at the hands of some real scary creatures, witches, and things like that. And one of the children ends up getting all the IOUs and all the money from the rich old guy. And I think basically the old guy ends up going to hell at the end, and then the kid gets all these IOUs, so the whole town is free from this guy. I really liked that one because, like I said, it seemed like the old EC comics where somebody was getting their comeuppance because they were being so mean and nasty to people when there really was no reason to. Um, One of my other favorites is one that Tom Savini actually directed and created the creature for, was Inside the Closet. Um, and basically, this student boards or becomes a boarder at a professor's house, and she discovers this closet that's locked, and she kind of wonders why it's so small, for one thing, because the professor tells her that it belonged to his daughter who's away at school. And she's like, well, why is it so small? And he kind of evades all her questions about the room and stuff like that when it comes to things concerning his daughter. Um, and so over time, she becomes convinced that there's a rat or mouse or some kind of critter in the closet. And she's like, can we open up the closet and, set some traps and whatever? And he's like, I told you I can't unlock the closet because I've lost the key. Um, so amazingly, the closet door comes open. She's able to put a rat trap in it. The professor seems a little um, disturbed by that, but he doesn't really say anything. Um, so she ends up like putting her hand in the closet to try to feel around because she thinks maybe she's caught something. The rat trap winds up slamming on her hand and almost breaking her fingers. Um, and she keeps on asking the professor questions about it. He's like, you didn't hear anything in there, or there's no rats in there, and blah blah blah. And then finally, a creature does come out of the closet, um, and succeeds, I guess, in killing the girl. That's how it appears. Then you think it's going to go downstairs and kill the professor. It turns out the little creature is the professor's daughter, um, and he knew all along that she was in the closet. Um, and like I said, Tom Savini created the creature, which is really great. I think he did a good job at directing this one also. This one, the original air date was November 18th, 1984. Another favorite episode of mine, and this one is based on a Stephen King story, is called Word Processor of the Gods, that had an original air date of November 25th, 1984. And it basically tells the story of a writer who years ago was in love with a woman, and he couldn't bring himself to tell her how he felt and ask her out. And so his worthless brother ended up marrying Belinda, the woman he was in love with. He ends up marrying a woman that they don't mesh well. She treats him terribly, makes fun of his chosen profession, etc., etc. And basically all she wants to do is sit around and eat and go play church bingo. Um, but there's an accident, and his nephew Jonathan and the woman he was in love with, Belinda, and his brother all die in a car accident because I believe his brother was drunk and drove their van off a cliff. Um, but before his nephew died, he built a word processor for his uncle, um, to be delivered to him on his birthday. And it's almost like the nephew knew something bad was going to happen to him, so he asked his neighbor, um, an older gentleman, to make sure that his uncle got this present in case something happened to him. And so he does. The neighbor makes sure that the writer gets the present. Um, and it's a homemade word processor. It's not a word processor that you would go to the store and buy. And of course, the uncle thinks, well, it couldn't work. It couldn't work. But he turns it on and everything, and it does work, but not in the way that you would think a word processor would work. For instance, he says that his wife's picture is on a table or a desk in his study, and then he hits delete. He turns around, the picture is actually gone in real life. Um, then he types, my wife's picture is on the table where it was before. He presses execute. The picture comes back. Um, and he goes on for a while, and he has a son that has nothing in common with his father. All he wants to do is play music and make the power go out with his electric guitar, and his son's not really good at the music either, and the son's just as rude and obnoxious as the mother is. And so he deletes his son, and then becomes afraid that when his wife comes home from church and bingo that she's going to be all upset. But it's like when she comes home, she doesn't even remember that they had any kids or a child. Um, so then she insults him again, and so he goes back downstairs and he deletes her from the reality. By this time, the word processor starts smoking, and he thinks, "Oh, I've got to hurry up and do this one last thing before this thing blows up." And so he finally decides that he is going to bring Belinda and Jonathan back, and they're going to be, or she's going to be his wife, and Jonathan's going to be his son instead of his nephew. And at the very end, the smoke clears, and Jonathan comes and talks to him, and then Belinda shows up with some hot cocoa at the very end. In a way, I think this is a poignant story. Not really frightening, but it's typical of a lot of Stephen King stories, because sometimes Stephen King goes that way. He doesn't go so much into the horrific territory as he does that poignant uh, childhood uh, fantasy type, that kind of stuff, the stuff from our youth. He did that with Stand By Me, or The Body, rather, was a story um, that was really a novella and not a short story. But a lot of people don't even know, unless they know Stephen King's work, they don't even know that that's a Stephen King story, and that the Stand By Me movie that's based on The Body was based on Stephen King's work. They're like, no, it couldn't be, because he does that real scary stuff. But he does a lot of different stuff, and that's what makes him such a great writer and such a prolific writer, I think. Um, oh, and then another absolute favorite from, and I still remember who I was watching this one with, and what we were eating at the time. My cousin Heather, we're really really close. We've always been really close, and so as kids, we used to spend a lot of time at each other's houses. You know, kind of having a slumber party like thing. You know, she would stay a few days or a week with me at my house, and then I would either stay a week or a few days with her at her house. And so she was staying with me at this time, and it became a weekly thing that my family sat down and we all watched Tales from the Darkside. So she was visiting during that time, and so A Case of the Stubborns was the episode that came on that week. And the original air date was December 2nd, 1984, and for some reason, I don't know if maybe we didn't get to watch this when the original air date was, because for some reason I'm remembering this was in the summertime. I wouldn't have thought my cousin would have come over in December. Usually we got together for these little sleepovers when it was summer vacation and we were out of school. So it could have been possible that we watched this one later on, not on the original air date. But I do remember we were drinking lemonade and eating popcorn. It's weird the things that you remember. But I have always loved this episode. Um, and this is another one that doesn't happen in the modern times. You can again tell by the clothing that the people were wearing. Has an early role for Christian Slater as the grandson um, of the old man that refuses to believe he's dead. Because what happens is he dies, and his daughter is upset, and his grandson's upset. Um, and they're kind of sitting down to breakfast, and then all of a sudden Grandpa comes down the steps like nothing's happened and wants his breakfast. And they keep trying to convince him he's dead. They have the preacher come over, played by Brent Spiner, or Spinner. I think it's Brent Spiner from Star Trek, who played Data. He puts in a really comical performance as a preacher, as an old time preacher in this one. And they call the doctor and everything to try to get him to believe that he's dead. And all the time, all this stuff is going on. Grandpa is slowly rotting in front of them. And he just keeps sitting out in his rocking chair on the front porch, screaming at everybody, telling them he's not dead. And he finally tells his family, he says, if I saw me some proof that I was really dead, I'd be the first to go upstairs and lay down my burden forever. So the grandson gets the idea to go see the old voodoo woman. And at first he's scared of her, but it turns out she's just a funny old lady, and she knew his grandpa from a long time ago. And she says she figures she owes him one, so she gives him something that she says is going to work to make his grandpa realize that he's dead. So he brings it home. It's wrapped in a black like napkin, and his mother looks at it and smells it, and she said, Jody, this isn't nothing but strong black pepper. And she thinks that the voodoo woman's tried to pull one over on him, and he's like, no, 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 she promised it would work. So Grandpa comes downstairs ready to eat catfish and greens and stuff like that. And by this time he's looking pretty bad. And so the grandson all of a sudden says, Grandpa, you got some greens on your chin. And he says, well, thank you, Jody. And he goes to pick up his napkin, which of course has the pepper in it. And he shakes it, and that causes all the pepper to go up like his nose and stuff. And he sneezes into the handkerchief, and he sneezes his nose off. And that's what makes him realize that, oh, hey, I'm dead. And he says, well, there ain't no fool like an old fool. And he says goodbye to his family and goes upstairs and lays down and dies for good. Um, yeah, I was going to try to think of some other ones, at least from the first season, that I liked. Anniversary dinner. Now this one was a creepy one. That the original air date on this one was February 3rd, 1985. This old or seemingly innocent, loving old couple um, are planning their anniversary dinner, and this girl and her boyfriend, who's kind of a douchebag, show up, and she kind of wants to stay with the old people, instead of them sleeping out in sleeping bags under all the elements and stuff. And he's like, well, if you don't come with me now, then don't come with me at all, or something like that. And so, um, anyway, I guess her and the boyfriend end up having a fight, so she ends up showing back up at the older couple's home, and they take her in, let her stay, um, and show her their. I don't know why an older couple would have a hot tub, but for whatever reason, this older couple has a hot tub, and they have a whole room with like music. You can play music, and you get in the hot tub, and there's animal heads on the walls and stuff like that. Like the old guy was a hunter at one time, and the young woman's always talking about the children and how much she misses the children, and how they always added something to the anniversary dinner. And so you're thinking, well, she's being nostalgic and all that. But what really ends up happening is they get the young girl drunk, um, and she's in the sauna or the hot tub, and they cook her essentially and eat her. So this nice, seemingly nice old couple is really cannibals. Um, and the the woman says, I think we should share this with the children. And the last scene of this episode, they open up a cabinet and there's all these skulls in there. So I'm not really sure if they had children on their own and ate their own children, or they just, took young people here and there, just like this girl that showed up, and, they kind of took her in for a little bit. If that was the case. But for whatever the reason, or whatever they did, that last shot is very, very creepy to me. And then of course the credits come up over top of the skulls. That was a little bit more of a scarier, or just a scarier episode than some of them. Um, let's see. Just trying to. This is basically going to talk about a few of these. Grandma's Last Wish is another one that I like really well. The original air date on it was June 16th, 1985. Um, and it's all about. I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with this family dynamic of a parent gets older, and maybe the spouse has died, and so they go to live with the children. In this case, grandma's having to live with her son's family, because she falls and stuff like that, and they just don't want her living alone. Well, eventually it gets too much for the family, and they want to send her to a nursing home. And so, in preparation for grandma going to the nursing home, they want to have one nice dinner and all that stuff and give Grandma one last wish. Well, evidently, Grandma's last wish is that the the rest of the family will join her at the nursing home because her wish comes true. They all get old and can't hear and get age spots and all that. Even the young girl in the family, the daughter, uh, and it's kind of funny and kind of gruesome at the same time. And all the while, Grandma's looking younger and can hear better, and probably her age spots are disappearing and all that. So she got her last wish. But there are some more really good stories in here, but I'm not gonna go on and on about these um, for too long because mainly I want to cover some more. Um, it has come to my attention that nobody's in here chatting, so um, there might be somebody lurking around maybe that doesn't want to chat that's listening to me blab. But I'm guessing I won't spend too much time on this stuff. Um, but I did want to just do something fun tonight. So we're going to move on to the Twilight Zone series from the 80s. I'm not talking about the original Twilight Zone series, which was a great series as well. But honestly, I haven't watched as many of those episodes as I have the ones that came on in the 80s. Because that was when I was growing up. You older people older than me, I'll be 45 on my birthday. So you people that are older than I am will probably remember the original Twilight Zone. But, I'd want to study those a little bit more before I actually talked about them because I don't want to be talking out of my butt about them. So, but this was the incarnation of the Twilight Zone that I really, really liked other than the original episodes. I didn't really care for, I think one came out in the 2000s or whatever. That at first I thought it was this one and I accidentally bought it, and it turned out that was not the case. And I wasn't fond of that. And I want to say that Jordan Peele guy, I was thinking he was doing an incarnation of it, but honestly, I don't think I've watched any of those episodes, so I can't really comment on that. But I think one of the things that made this version of the Twilight Zone so unique is because it had a lot of people that became big names later. Season 1 alone has Bruce Willis in it, Adrian Barbeau, Morgan Freeman, Martin Landau, John Carradine, Steve Railsback, Frances McDormand, Peter Coyote. I mean, you pretty much got an all-star lineup just in the cast for season 1. And actually, in the first episode, Saturday, Bruce Willis stars in it. And I thought he did for this to be one of his early acting jobs. I thought he did really well. This came out originally. The original air date was September 27th, 1985. And it's based on a story by Harlan Ellison, who any of you that read Harlan Ellison know that I believe he does quite a bit of science fiction, fantasy type stuff. He may have also did some horror. I'm not really sure. But Bruce Willis played. Oh, and it's directed by Wes Craven. So George Romero did a lot of things with Tales from the Darkside, And I think both he and Wes Craven did a lot, at least with the earlier stuff on this Twilight Zone from the 80s. But anyway, Bruce Willis plays a character, Jay Novins, who accidentally dials his own number while he's sitting at a bar. Um, and he means to call someone else, but he calls the number that he knows really well, his own, and is shocked when somebody picks up the phone. It turns out this is I guess, a doppelganger for him, and they do battle the whole episode to see who's going to win out. And the doppelganger wins out because the original Jay Novin is kind of a pessimist and doesn't take care of things the way he needs to, doesn't take care of his family, doesn't take care of responsibilities with women, and, you know, and so basically the original Jay Novin just fades away, literally, and the doppelganger takes over by the end of the episode. Um, but really good episode. Um, and some of these on both series, the Tales from the Darkside and the Twilight Zone, have, at least on the first seasons, have commentary. This one has commentary by Harlan Ellison, and it also has audio commentary by Wes Craven and Alan Brennert, who wrote the screenplay from the Harlan Ellison story. Um, the second episode of that group, or well, this is episode one. Episode one actually had two little vignettes, I think be what you'd call them. It's called A Little Peace and Quiet. I find this A Little Peace and Quiet very disturbing. And it was probably even more disturbing back when it came out um, in 85. Um, this one was directed by Wes Craven, and it stars Melinda Dillon as a mother which most mothers would probably uh, be able to sympathize with this woman. She's got three kids and a husband that all depend on her, and they're always wanting something from her. She never has any time for herself. And then one day she's digging in her garden. She finds some kind of medallion that when she puts it on and says, "Shut up," everything like freezes. Like people stop talking, they stop moving. The TV, if it's on, it stops until she thinks, oh, finally, I can get some time for me. So, like, when her family's becoming too much for her, she just tells them to be quiet or shut up or whatever. And then when she's ready for them to start in again, she'll say, start talking. But she has to have the medallion on to be able to do this. If she doesn't have the medallion on, it doesn't work. So, she goes through, I guess, several days of this. And of course, this was during the time of the Cold War when we were convinced that Russia was going to have some kind of nuclear annihilation on us, and people were afraid for a very long time. So this story was really fed into those fears because Melinda Dillon's character is cleaning her house, and this guy, man and a woman, show up at her door wanting her to come to a debate that Non-Pop was sponsoring. And they're a group that is concerned about nuclear weapons and that nobody should have nuclear weapons, and if we keep up the way we're going, there's going to be nuclear war, etc., etc. So, she basically kicks them out and, tells them to shut up, and then takes them and drags them out in the yard and lays them down, and then says, start talking. And they wake up and they look at each other, and it's like, what just happened here? And it weirds them out, so they leave. And needless to say, she doesn't go to this debate. And then I guess a night or two goes by and she's taking a bath and relaxing, and all of a sudden her husband hollers at her from the bedroom, and she comes in there, and it it seems that Russia is sending a nuclear missile to the United States, and they're crying and upset, and wanting to get the kids together and everything. And she becomes so upset that she says, "Shut up, shut up, shut up," and everything stops, including this nuclear missile. But the thing is, she can't say start talking again, or this missile is going to come and blow up everything. But she's the only one that can move around and talk or anything. So the last shot is her leaving her house, walking out in the streets of this town, and seeing the nuclear warhead about to hit them. Um, and there's nothing she can do. She can either say start talking, let the nuclear warhead hit, or she can just live alone for the rest of her time on the planet. Um, which, again, I found it really, really disturbing. Um, really disturbing. Even though right now we're not in a Cold War situation, um, that just always, the threat of nuclear war just always really bothered me. Since I've been old enough to know about it and what that would entail. There's a movie actually. Oh goodness. I'm trying to remember the title of it now. Shoot, it just completely slipped my mind. But anyway, I'll probably remember it at some point. Maybe I can fill you guys in. Um, but anyway, in this movie, I think it was probably a made for television movie, and I remembered it uh, growing up, and then I was able to actually purchase a copy, and it concerns, the threat of nuclear war. Nuclear war ends up breaking out, and the people that survive, what they have to go through with the radiation poisoning and all of that. Um, and of course, some of those people are going to end up dying. Their hair's falling out, they're suffering radiation sickness. Probably some of them will get cancer. One gentleman tries to make his way back home, but there is no home when he gets there. It's completely destroyed. It is assumed that his wife and his kids are dead. Um, very a very sobering film, very disturbing film. Even though it didn't, at the time it didn't show a whole lot. Um, so at that time, that it was a real threat. I mean, you can say what you want about it, but nuclear war was indeed a real threat at one time, and I think we're still teetering on the edge of it being a real threat, because no one can tell me that there aren't nuclear weapons buried somewhere in the United States. Um, Somebody can tell me all day we don't have them somewhere, but I know we do. Um, Call me crazy, but that's what I believe. But so anything to do with the potential for nuclear war, or an actual nuclear war actually breaking out, is very frightening to me. So this episode of Little Peace and Quiet was very, very disturbing. Um, it's actually not an episode that I like to watch very often. Um, there's a lot of these that I like, especially in this first season. Um, Wordplay, for instance, has Annie Potts on it, who plays the wife of a salesman who is always trying to. Yep, Carnage. It's the day after. Yes, Yes, you are exactly right. Thank you. My memory has been like, I just think I'm overworked or something. Because I used to could just name off this stuff and it wasn't any trouble. But you are correct. But back to the wordplay episode that the original air date was October 4th, 1985. Um, this one was directed by Wes Craven. And like I said, it has Annie Potts in it playing the wife of a salesman played by Robert Klein, um, who is constantly having to learn the names of all this new medical equipment that he's supposed to be selling. And then things get a little weird. Slowly, people start using what he thinks they're joking with him by using the wrong words for things. For instance, his neighbor talks about his dog having puppies, and he calls his dog an encyclopedia. And then people start referring to lunch as a dinosaur, and it goes on and on and on. He thinks he's losing his mind, or first he thought somebody was playing a trick on him, then he thought maybe he was losing his mind. But his son is really sick and continues to get sicker, where he can't even breathe very well, and so by that point, he and his wife cannot even communicate with each other because they don't know what the other is saying. Um, and so they finally get the son to the hospital. He cannot communicate with the doctors and nurses, so his wife has to communicate with them. Um, and his son gets better, or the crisis passes, and the husband and wife go home, and they have to learn to communicate in other ways with each other than the normal, talking back and forth like, how was your day, and stuff like that, because things have just flipped upside down for him as far as language. And he must have felt like, that must be like what people from other countries, when they come to our country to live and they don't know the English language, how frightening that would be. So this sort of reminded me of that. Um, in some ways, or even if I went to a foreign country and I didn't know the language, how would I tell people if I was sick or hurt, or even, hey, where do I go to find food? What restaurant do I go to? Because they're going to have totally different names that I'm not familiar with for things like restaurant, hospital, doctor, different things like that. Um, so the final shot is Robert Klein's character going up to his son's room and taking a children's book off his shelf and looking at it, and it has strange words that he did not associate with these things, to associate with dogs, balls, and so he's literally trying to teach himself this new way of speaking. Um, Kentucky Rye. This is a kind of creepy little episode. It has Jeffrey DeMunn in it, who plays a salesman who I guess pretty much is an alcoholic. He can't stop at just one or two drinks. He just keep going and going and going. And so he makes a big, he makes a big sale, I guess, for his company. And so he and his boss and some of the other people that work in the office all go out to a bar and have drinks. Well, slowly, yeah, Carnage, I don't want to go through all of them because we'd be here all night, but I did want to go through a few of my favorite ones, at least from the first seasons of these things. Uh, but anyway, back to Kentucky Ride. He just Jeffrey DeMunn's character just keeps drinking, drinking, drinking. The other people slowly bow out. And then finally his boss is like, yeah, maybe we ought to all go home. And he's like, no, Irving, I don't want to go home. By this time he's pretty lit. Um, and so he ends up driving home intoxicated, um, and crashes into it appears he crashes into a tree. He thinks that has to swerve to miss somebody that's in his lane. It turns out to be a little bit different. Um, so he's got a cut on his head, but he seems okay. So he leaves his car, makes his way to a bar called Kentucky Rye. And at first, the people in there seem welcoming to him, and the bartenders seems pretty normal and offers him drinks and stuff like that. Then the bartender later on wants to sell him the bar. So he's able to take the check he got from that big deal breaker he made in the office, um, and he buys the bar. After he does that, things start getting weird. People start, kind of shunning him, moving away from him, and not really wanting to speak to him. And he sees this guy and this woman kind of sitting off away from everyone, and they kind of keep staring at him, and he wonders why. Um, and it turns out that I'm guessing that the guy is the ghost of the guy that he killed while he was intoxicated, and went into that guy's lane, hit that guy, killed him, and subsequently Jeffrey DeMunn's character was killed as well. And um, when the ghost of the guy tells him this, he's like, "You're crazy. I didn't do any such thing, blah, blah, blah." And then the bartender shows back up, and I'm not sure if the bartender is supposed to simulate the devil or what, but I don't think he's a very nice guy or entity. Um, because the bar turns out to have spider webs and stuff, and it's not a new bar. It's evidently been closed for some time. And then you see the cops and the ambulance people putting the bodies into the ambulance of the guy that Jeffrey DeMunn's character hit, and also Jeffrey DeMunn's body. And then you see that guy's wife watching very sad as they load the bodies into the ambulance. Um, and that one's kind of, towards the end, is kind of disturbing a little bit, but it's an episode that I like, and I have went back and watched it several times. Um, Now, another little poignant episode is episode 4, um, which the original air date on this one was October 18th, 1985. Little Boy Lost, directed by Tommy Lee Wallace, who people that watch a lot of John Carpenter stuff will know that Tommy Lee Wallace helped John Carpenter with a lot of stuff. Plus, he did a lot of great stuff on his own as well. But a photographer played by Susan Hubley gets offered an overseas assignment where she will have to go overseas and live to have this job. But she has I'm guessing he's a serious boyfriend, and well, I don't know how serious she is about him. He's totally in love with her. And she tells him that she has to make a decision in like 3 days or something about whether she's going to go overseas and take this job. And he's just crushed. He's like, how can you make a decision like that in 2 or 3 days? Doesn't our relationship mean anything to you? And don't you want to marry me and have a family? And she's like, yeah, I want to do all that stuff, but I want to have a career too. And so she's kind of leaning towards she'd like to have the career first, then have the husband and the kids. But in the succeeding days where she's trying to make her decision, um, she meets a young boy played by Scott Grimes um, in the zoo, and she thinks that her agency or an agency has sent him over so that she can take pictures of him with the animals and stuff like that, and they even take a picture together. And this boy just keeps showing up, but if she asks too many questions, he runs away. So by the end, when she makes her decision, and she makes the decision to go overseas for the assignment, which means she's given up the boyfriend and the chance to get married to him and have a child. Um, the little boy is so um, heartsick and sad, and it turns out that if she had stayed with the boyfriend, Scott Grimes' character would have been her baby. Um, so he was sent there in the hopes that she would choose him as her child. But because she made the decision to go overseas for the photography assignment, um, this little boy is going to be somebody else's baby. And then when she finally decides to settle down, she will have someone else. And he calls her mom before he fades away. And this one was a little sad and poignant, and didn't really fit the horrific side of a lot of these horror television shows. Um, but it was a good one. I still liked it. I still love to watch this one. It almost makes me cry though when I watch it. Um, now, episode 5 has an episode that is kind of poignant and sad too. Um, the original air date for this one was October 25th, 1985. It was titled "If She Dies," and it stars Tony LoBianco um, and Andrea Barber, who ended up playing Kimmy Gibbler on the Full House television series, plays his daughter in this one. A very, very young Andrea Barber. Um, and what happens is the mother has passed away, so it's just the father and the daughter. They have a really close relationship. Um, and they go out one day in the car, and the father's going to take her to school, and then he's going to go to work. They get in a car accident, which puts the daughter in a coma, and the doctors don't really give the father much hope that she's going to survive this. He ends up seeing a little girl um, outside in a church, or a church orphanage that used to be a church orphanage, and the nuns are selling off all the furniture and stuff like that. And this ghostly little girl kind of directs him to a bed, um, and he ends up, at first he's like, no, no, sister, I'm not interested in buying anything. But then when the ghostly little girl keeps pointing towards the bed and encouraging him to, something just makes him buy it. And he takes it home. Then he ends up getting the teddy bear that this little girl had. And the little girl had died. And so this literally is a ghost that is coming to visit him, even at his house at night. So the ghostly little girl encourages him to get her teddy bear, Toby. And so then he decides or he becomes convinced that the bed will cure his daughter and help help her wake from her coma. So he kind of steals her out of the hospital. You know, they're like saying, "You can't take her out of here. You can't take her out of here." And he's like, "Well, watch me." And so he does, takes her home, puts her in the bed. She wakes up from the coma. And it kind of hints at the end that the ghost of the little girl has kind of inhabited his daughter's body because she asks for Toby, the teddy bear, and smiles at the end of the episode. That's another really good episode. Um, Another disturbing episode. It's a short episode, but it's very, very disturbing. Um, is Examination Day, which the original air date for this one was November 1st, 1985. Um, it's directed by Paul Lynch, who also directed the Canadian horror film Prom Night, for those of you that remember that movie. Um, and this is all about a young child. I guess he's a young boy. I guess he's turning 13, I believe. And this is supposed to be a futuristic one. Um, and his birthday wish is, oh, okay, he's turning 12. I thought it was 13, but it's 12. His birthday wish for his birthday is to get a good mark on the government examination for 12-year-olds. Because he's a really smart kid and he always wants to do good on all his tests. But his parents just seem strangely uneasy about, they tell him, they say, "Dickie, you don't have to worry about this test, just do the best you can." He's like, "But I want to do well. I want to do well." And there's just some undercurrent of something's not quite right. And so it's like his parents it's kind of the opposite of what your parents did when you were in school. Your parents always encouraged you to, do your best, do the best you can on every test and study hard and all that. And so Dickie spends a lot of his time studying for this test because he really wants to do good. And his dad's like, "You don't have to spend all your time doing that. Why don't you do something fun?" And his mom's kind of the same way. And like I said, there's this strange undercurrent of uneasiness flowing through this entire episode until the end. And so I hope there's nobody in here actually that has not ever seen any of these episodes because I'm giving away some of the twists in these. But they're just so good, But anyway, he's just convinced that he wants to do good and he's not going to listen to his parents say, "Oh, go have fun," Whereas when we were young, we would have said, "All right, you don't want me to study, I'm going to go have fun." But so anyway, the day comes for his test, and he really wants something called an omnicoder, which is kind of like video chat now. Like we have video chat, but the omnicoder was kind of like, I guess, a precursor to what it is now when we do video chats online with someone or through our cell phones or whatever. So his parents are like, "We'll see, Dickie," and yeah, I agree, Carnage. I like that they're varied. The Twilight Zone episodes the Tales from Darkside episodes were like that as well. I'm not sure if you were in here when I was talking about a few of those. They had some that were a little more creepy and disturbing, and then they had some that were a little bit comedic. And I enjoy the comedic ones, but when I'm watching these types of things, I I like them to be either creepy or just horror, disturbing, or I even like the poignant ones more. But it is good that they kind of mixed it up a little bit with all of these series. Um, but anyway, back to examination day. Um, Dickie does end up getting an omnicoder, and he can't use it though until after he finishes his exam. So um, his his dad takes him for the exam. The mother stays behind, and again, she looks very uneasy. The father does too when they get to the government office where he's going to take this exam. Um, and Dickie ends up going uh, in to take the exam. They make him drink some kind of, I guess, like truth serum, and they tell him after he drinks it that that is to make sure that he tells the truth, or doesn't lie on anything. And he's like, well, why would I do that? I'll tell it. I'll be honest. I'll tell the truth. And the guy that gave him the drink says, well, the government's not so sure that you would. And this is just to make sure. So they get him set up in front of like a computer to take this test. And the father doesn't get to stay with Dickie. He has to go home, and they wait to hear from the government um, when the test is over. So the last scene of this episode, the parents get a call on their own omnicoder that tells them that um, their son basically scored too high on this examination, and the government has killed him, and they can uh, tell them how they want to handle his remains. And this is just so disturbing that a government, any government, especially our government, would kill a 12-year-old for scoring too high on some intelligence exam. Very frightening. And even, I didn't remember this one from the originally seeing it. So when I got this set, and I rewatched, I was like, damn, that's very disturbing. Um, Another poignant episode I really, really like that has Danny Kaye on it is Paladin of the Lost Hour. Um, that was written by Harlan Ellison. It stars Danny Kaye as an older gentleman who holds the last hour of the world in a magical timepiece. Um, and so basically, he meets up with this Vietnam vet who saves him from being beat up and robbed by these hoodlums. And I didn't tell you the original air date was November 8th, 1985. In case you want to know. Yes, Carnage. For examination day, that was one heck of a twist. It's definitely an episode to watch. But again, it's one of those kind of disturbing ones that it's cringeworthy. I don't like to watch it very often. Usually wait a while between watching episodes like that and a little peace and quiet ones like that. Anyway, back to the Paladin of the Lost Hour. Danny Kaye's character ends up staying in the Vietnam vet's apartment, and they tell each other stories about their life and stuff. And at first, the guy's a little bit hesitant about believing Danny Kaye's character, about that he holds that last hour, and as long as that last hour doesn't toll, the world's not going to end. But the more time he spends with him and the more they become friends, he realizes that yeah, this guy really is holding the last hour. But the thing is, Danny Kaye's character is going to die soon, and he tells the the gentleman this, and he wants the Vietnam vet to take over for him when he dies, and so he would be the paladin of the lost hour. And they kind of explain how there came to be a lost hour. Um, but I'm not going to go into details about that. If you want to watch the episode, which I highly recommend, if you've either got this set or have access to this first season, um, that one be a great one to watch. Um, but it ends up that the Vietnam vet tells a story of another soldier who saved his life by jumping up and yelling, and the enemy shot that guy instead of killing the guy that's been talking to Danny Kaye. Um, and he's lived with the guilt for since then, and he can't. I guess it's kind of giving PTSD, which a lot of people in wars have. Um, so Danny Kaye's character ends up giving him a gift and letting him see this dead soldier one final time. The soldier is able to tell him, "Hey, I didn't even know you were there." Um, you know, he actually thanked the Vietnam vet for telling him this, because he said, "I didn't just die for nothing. I saved your life." And so that the guy is able to make peace then. Um, and then Danny Kaye ends up passing away, and the Vietnam vet becomes the paladin of the lost hour. Another really poignant episode. Um, Another one I really like, and this is based on a classic story by Ray Bradbury called The Burning Man. The original air date for this one was November 15th, 1985. And it's written and directed by J.D. Feigelstein, who did Dark Night of the Scarecrow, for those of you that have seen that film. Um, and during a heat wave in the 1930s, so not all of these take place in modern times, or modern times for the 80s. This one takes place in the 1930s, and the description here says a mother, but it's actually the boy's aunt, played by Piper Laurie, and her nephew, played by the main kid on the Monster Squad, I believe. And again, I'm forgetting. That's awful. I'm forgetting his name. Carnage. Maybe you remember the main kid from the Monster Squad. But anyway, he's in this playing the nephew of Piper Laurie, and they're driving out in the country. It's a really hot day, and they're wanting to go swimming um, in a lake out in the country, and they meet a strange guy that wants a ride from them, played by Roberts Blossom. And boy, Roberts Blossom, what a great actor. He could play anything, and he plays this strange old guy to the hilt. I mean, it kind of makes your skin crawl. And he keeps talking about, as they're driving along, he keeps talking about cicadas shedding their skin and coming every 17 years. And um, he gets more and more dark and disturbing as he tells his story. And then Piper Laurie just screams at him to stop, tells him to get out, that she has crucifixes and holy water and all this stuff. And so they kind of leave the old guy in the dust and go for their swim. Then on their way back, they meet this little redheaded boy that's dressed strangely in the same color suit that Robert's Blossom's character was dressed in, and um, which I thought was kind of weird anyway. But he strangely he tells them that he was at some kind of party or barbecue or something with his parents, and they just left him. Um, I don't know why Piper Laurie would really believe that, but for whatever reason she does, and they agree to give him a ride back uh, to his house, and they start driving. I I think you may be right, Carnage, that his name was Sean in the Monster Squad. It's been a little while since I watched Monster Squad. I actually need to go back and watch that again. Um, but as they're driving along, it's like the boy suddenly starts talking like Robert's Blossom's character, and starts talking about genetic evil and all that. Then he leans forward from the back seat and whispers something in Piper Laurie's ear, and then like everything goes dark, and you're assuming maybe that the little boy is killing the aunt and the nephew. But very, very bizarre, but very typical of Ray Bradbury stories. And I really like it. I like the setup. Um, I like uh, I like the characters in it. I think using Piper Laurie, Robert's Blossom. I think all those people made this really work. And if you read a lot of Ray Bradbury, I think you could appreciate this one. Maybe if you're not into that kind of horror, then you wouldn't like it. But I really like it a lot. Um, Another one that's kind of comedic is Dealer's Choice, which was part of the episode 8 from November 15th, 1985, with the Burning Man and another one, Act Break. This one was directed by Wes Craven and stars Morgan Freeman and Emmett Walsh. And also Dan Hedaya, um, who may or may not be playing the devil in this one. But what happens is Emmett Walsh him and his wife are having problems, and so she's kind of semi left him and went to stay with her sister or something, and so he takes advantage of that and has a poker game at the house, invites all his buddies over, Morgan Freeman's character being one of them, and then Dan Hedaya's character comes over and says that he's covering for his cousin who's sick. And as the men play, they discover that Dan Hedaya's character keeps getting 666, and he keeps winning with these hands. And they become suspicious of him and suspect that he's the devil. And it turns out he is the devil, and he's there to take one of those guys' souls to hell. And he's wanting to take Emmett Walsh's character to hell. And so then he says that, they're moaning and groaning and saying, no, you can't take him to hell and blah, 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 and you play dirty and all this stuff. So he says, all right, all right, all right, we'll do it this way. And they play a game, a card game, and M.M. Walsh still loses. And Dan Hedaya's character is like, okay, I'm tired of this. It's time for us to go. You've got to come with me. I'm going to take you to hell. And so they say, okay, one more game, and they play low ball. And there is absolutely no way that Dan Hedaya's character can win at low ball because he never had low scores or low hands. And in low ball, a low hand wins. And so, um, technically, Emmett Walsh wins against him. Dan Hedaya's character tries to cheat because he's the devil. He lies, he cheats, he does everything. Um, so they finally talk him out of taking Emmett Walsh to hell. And he says, I've had such a good time with you guys. I'm going to give you a break. And he leaves them like this massive buffet of food. Um, and he says something like, don't say that the devil's not a good sport. Um, and then he just basically leaves. With the promise that he'd like to come and play with them again sometime. But that's another one of my favorites on that. Um, Now, episode 10 has two episodes that I really like. One is The Shadow Man. These came out November 29th, 1985. Um, the Shadow Man is directed by Joe Dante. And there's a genre name for you, Joe Dante. If you've seen The Howling and stuff like that. But in this one, a boy is afraid of the creature under the bed, basically, like a boogeyman. Only this guy is called the Shadow Man. And he lives under this kid's bed. And this kid is kind of picked on by the jocks in school and stuff. And he's absolutely in love with the pretty blonde girl that's hanging out with the jocks and stuff. And he'd really like to, go on a date with her or whatever you can do at 11, 12 years old. And so it eventually the Shadow Man comes out from under his bed, and the boy's so scared he thinks he's going to kill him. And the Shadow Man says, "I am the Shadow Man, and I will not harm the person under whose bed I lie or sleep," or whatever he says. Can't exactly remember the exact verbiage on that, but so the boy is like, "Oh, great! Now I can use this to my advantage." Um, so he uses it to get popular, but in the process, he forgets about his old friends, starts hanging out with the blonde girl, um, and then he decides that he's going to let his Shadow Man injure and or kill the guy that's been bullying him, the big jock that at one time had the girl and had all the stuff and had all the control. And so he, the boy thinks there's only one Shadow Man, and he thinks that the one Shadow Man lies under his bed. So he's not scared of, the Shadow Man anymore. And so he lures the boy out to the park at night that he wants to get revenge on, and waits for his Shadow Man to come. Well, Shadow Man turns up, but it's not his Shadow Man. It's a Shadow Man from somebody else's bed, and so it ends up hurting the boy by the end of the episode. And the other boy, the jock, ends up running away because he sees a Shadow Man. He's like, "Hey, man, he's there." Um, the next episode, or the next little vignette after the Shadow Man, is the Uncle Devil Show, which is another kind of comedic one. Um, and it all goes back to the thing about how parents don't always keep an eye on their kids. They should. They talk like they're being good parents, but they're not really being the watchful parents that know what their kid is doing. Um, so Dad brings home a videotape uh, for his son from the, I guess either from the store or a rental store, and it's Tim Tim Ferritt and Friends, and of course he just thinks it's some kid's cartoon. Um, but what happens is there's the Uncle Devil show on Tim Ferritt and Friends, and he's also sent in the little boy is also sent in box tops from Beelzebub's cereal. See where it's coming. It's got a devil motif all the way through this. And he sent in box tops. You remember when you used to could send in box tops and get free stuff? But I never got anything like this. This kid got a cape and like a magic wand and a hat and all, all this different stuff. And so he's watching the Uncle Devil show, and the parents are just in the kitchen and he's in the living room, but again, they're not paying any attention at all. So he's doing these things with his magic wand, saying abba dabby dabbies, whatever. And, bugs are coming out of there, and his dinosaur turns into a giant creature that's outside. The parents' heads turn into creature heads, and they're sitting there talking to each other. They don't even pay any attention. And then finally, the boy gets everything just to stop, and then the Uncle Devil show's over, and Tim Ferritt and Friends plays, and it's over. But yeah, I think it just says a lot about neglectful parents that give the illusion that they're good parents, but they're not really watching out for their kids' well-being or their own well-being or anybody else's well-being for that matter. Let's see. There's another one. I'm not going to go through. There's a lot of good ones on this. But if I was to cover all of them, we'd be here all night. And so the one episode, episode 15, the original air date was January 24th, 1986. The Monsters episode. That stars Ralph Bellamy as a seemingly kindly old man, Mr. Bendixson, that moves to a neighborhood, and this lonely little boy, played by the kid from the boy from the Poltergeist film. He's lonely. His friend moved away, and Ralph Bellamy's character moved into his best friend's house, and so he kind of becomes friends with the old guy, and the old guy teaches him things about monsters and stuff like that, and then he tells him there's the real monsters, the vampires and stuff like that. That's not what you got to be afraid of. It's the real monsters. And as the episode goes on, people are getting sick in the town. And then the little boy gets sick, and his parents get sick, and they start bleeding. It's kind of disturbing, the part where they actually turn into the monsters, and all the monsters in the town come and kill Mr. Bennington. And then I'm guessing that the little boy is going to take over for Mr. Bennington. That at least that's what it hints at towards the end of the film or end of the episode. But I really like that one as well. Yeah, I might have to do a part 2 of this because there's a lot of these that that I really like. Okay, episode 18. The original air date was February 14th, 1986, Valentine's Day. This is one I remember from my youth and was able to remember quite a bit of it when I watched it again years later. Um, was the Grandma episode, which is based on a Stephen King story written by Harlan Ellison. Um, a young boy is left home alone. He's probably about 12, 13, maybe. And his mother has to go to the hospital because his brother has broken his arm. And so the boy is left alone with his very elderly grandmother. He's always been scared of his grandmother, and there have been hints that maybe she's a witch. And um, you hear, the boy remembering his mother talking with her brothers and sisters, and it just seemed like grandma was a witch, and so he's always been scared of her. Um, but he promised his mom he would take care of her while his mom was gone. So she starts hollering for her tea, and he, tries to bring her tea, and then he gets scared and he drops it, and it goes on, and then he thinks she's dead, and he makes himself get up close to her to see if she's breathing or not, and she grabs him, and then it switches to a scene where the boy has got his head down on the kitchen table, and the mother comes in, and he tells her that grandma died while she was gone. And the mother comes up to hug him and comfort him and all this stuff. And the boy raises his head up, and his eyes are glowing red. So we are left to assume that grandma has entered the little boy. And I think Stephen King probably wrote this because when he was growing up, his mother's mother, I think, or maybe both of her parents, were living with them for a short time before they passed away. And then Stephen King's own mother died of cancer. Um, and I think Grandma was one of the stories that um, came about because, sometimes when you're a little kid, you fear old people. There's not really a reason to fear them per se, but it's just, it's one of those things where um, they're sort of creepy and they smell funny and all. It's just they're not young anymore, so it's just strange to a young person to constantly be with some, especially when they're ill too, and if they end up dying in the home. So I think a lot of things from Stephen King's youth played into that. I think it also played into there was a VHS that you could get. I don't even know if you might be able to get it off of eBay now, but I don't know how much it would cost. I found it at a store a long time ago that had some stories from Night Shift, Stephen King's Night Shift collection. And it had the boogeyman, and it also had the woman in the room about a guy's mother who was dying, I'm guessing, of cancer, just the same way Stephen King's mother died of cancer. And he has to sadly make the decision of whether to euthanize her by just giving her pills, more and more pills, until she finally just dies or goes to sleep and dies. I think that one and Grandma came about because of things in his past. Let's see. Okay, another kind of I found this one really creepy, especially for a television episode. Was episode 21. The original air date was March 21st, 1986. This one was also directed by Paul Lynch. It was called Need to Know. And it's based on a story by Sidney Sheldon. And I'm not sure if that's the Sidney Sheldon that wrote a lot of books or this is a different Sidney Sheldon. I need to look into that. So basically, a government investigator, I guess like a FBI type person, is sent to a town where insanity is spreading from person to person like a plague. This also stars Frances McDormand. And there are some truly unsettling scenes in this one. They go and see this older lady to talk to her, and all of a sudden she tries to stab the guy, the FBI agent. And I don't know, it's just very bizarre and unsettling and disturbing. And I guess I was kind of like in the eye of the hurricane. I was almost at the point where I thought maybe Frances McDormand and the FBI agent were going to escape all this and, like leave town and maybe fall in love, get married, and have kids and whatever. But no, they're the last two in this small town to get insanity. So I highly recommend this one, even though it is quite disturbing. Okay, so those are just a few that I wanted to go over from at least Twilight Zone season 1. Like I said, I might do another one of these at another time that covers maybe some of the other seasons. The other, I wanted to talk briefly about this because I actually haven't had a chance to rewatch all 72 episodes of this, but this is Monsters. And it also included, some Stephen King stuff. Adrienne Barbeau was also in the episodes of this. Linda Blair, Tempest Bledsoe from The Cosby Show, Laura Branigan, Steve Buscemi, Jeff Conaway, Gina Gershon, Pam Grier. Yeah, I'm thinking I'll probably do a part 2. Maybe after I've watched some of these monster episodes, and also I could cover some other seasons of some of the other ones. Deborah Harry, Ashley Lawrence, Darren McGavin, Meatloaf, Tom Noonan, John Saxon, Tony Shalhoub, David Spade is even on one of these episodes, Tori Spelling, Jerry Stiller, and Lily Taylor, and there's more people in here. So, sometimes people think these are so cheesy and not really worth your time because so many. Oh, definitely Carnage. Yeah, check that out. I think Monsters was probably a little known series because probably got overshadowed by things like Tales from the Darkside and the Twilight Zone, and so people sort of it kind of maybe slid under the radar a little bit. I think I caught episodes of Monsters by accident. I was like, "Ooh, what's this show?" I just happened to catch it when it came on one night, and I was like, "Oh, this is nifty." This is another a different like horror episodic television that I might want to check out. And I actually forgot to put Friday the 13th, the series, in this bunch. So I actually think I will do a part 2 at some point. I'm glad that you're in here with me, Carnage, because otherwise I wouldn't have anybody else to talk to. And you really seem interested in this stuff. So, the one episode that I remember clearly on this one right now is the Stephen King based episode, The Moving Finger. Um, and it's all about this guy who one day finds a finger in his sink. And this must be the longest finger in recorded history because he keeps trying to do all kinds of things to get rid of it. It's running this guy crazy. Because who wants a finger in their sink, in their bathroom? And so eventually, the guy tries everything, and I think he ends up cutting the finger off, or he thinks it does, or he does, or he thinks he has cut it off, rather. And I think it grows back or grows longer or something to that effect. I'm going to have to refresh my memory on that. Yeah, Friday the 13th, the series, yeah, I'd forgotten about it being Canadian, but it was. Um, but it also showed here in the States quite a bit. I remember my mom and I watching a lot of episodes. My mom was into a lot of the same stuff that I was for a long time. Not so much now, which is a fear I have that the older I get, I'm going to get out of horror, but I hope not. But I think the last shot is of the guy with blood all over his face, and he's just like that. You know, it's kind of a weird look on his face. It's like I'm never gonna get rid of this finger in my train. uh, but like I said, I'm gonna have to go back and refresh my memory on some of these. Because it has been such a long while since I've seen several of them, and the moving finger is the one that sticks out in my mind right now. The last series for this video that I'm going to talk about is the Tales from the Crypt series. And Tales from the Crypt was a little bit later in my youth, but I loved it because, again, it harkens back to those old EC comics. And it reminds me, or the new Creep Show series is a little bit like Tales from the Crypt, as well as being like Creep Show. And maybe that's why I like the Creep Show series too, as well. But I'm going to talk about a few episodes to finish up this video or this live stream. I'm going to talk about a few episodes from the first season. One of my all-time favorites, and I always watch it around Christmas time, is And All Through the House. That Fred Decker did the screenplay for it. Robert Zemeckis directed it. And the original air date was June 10th, 1989, so it wasn't anywhere near Christmas time when this originally aired. And it stars Larry Drake as a mental patient who escapes, kills I guess a mall Santa or a store Santa, and takes his suit, and of course he has an axe, and he ends up at a house where a woman has killed her husband because she wants his money. She doesn't want him, she wants his money. She's got a lover on the side. Her daughter's upstairs waiting for Santa Claus to come. Yeah, I agree, Carnage. The Crypt Keeper is a great horror host. He's one of the all-time greats. I do remember Hitchhiker briefly, Wes. You've mentioned Hitchhiker before, I think, and you also like Tales from the Darkside, like I do. Wes, you must be bored. You're in here at 9:16 at night on my live stream. Yeah, Alfred Hitchcock Presents. That's one of the older ones that's good as well. Um, but back to and all to the house. The maniac, played by Larry Drake, ends up outside this woman's house where she's wanting to get rid of the body and stuff, and then you got this maniac out there, and it goes back and forth with her trying to escape from this guy, and then she thinks, oh well, I can just say the maniac killed my husband and all that, and she finally thinks she's escaped the clutches of the maniac, and who does her daughter bring in the front door but Larry Drake the maniac in the Santa suit with the axe. uh, Yeah, Wes, I didn't plan on doing anything tonight, and I do apologize for my dog barking in the background. I've got to take care of him in a little bit. Yeah, Steve is definitely asleep now. I mean, he was probably asleep around 8 o'clock for 5 hours. No, I don't think that long, but for a little bit. Um, but I just wanted to do something fun, so I thought I would do this one real quick just for fun. And I did have somebody in here. Oh, Carnage was in here before you came in here, so. And I'm hoping maybe some people are lurking and watching it as well. But anyway, and also the house I really like. Only Sin Deep is another good one. The screenplay is also done by Fred Decker. And the original air date was June 14th, 1989. Um, so it's about a call girl who's trying to get a rich playboy, and so she pawns her beauty. I don't know how really you would do this in anything other than a show like this, but she pawns her beauty in order to dress and impress. So what happens is she ends up getting old and decrepit looking, and then I think she has to kill people to and like basically take their skin. Um, Wes, I don't know if I'll be picking anything up from the Vinegar Syndrome sale or not. I don't even know if I'm gonna have the extra money to do that. You got any recommendations? But uh, anyway, I really liked this one because it was just kind of twisted and fun that way, and um, just the idea of somebody pawning their beauty was just interesting to me. Um, but that's the real, like, there's not many episodes on this first season. So I just talked about a couple of the highlights on that season. And Wes, like I was telling Carnage earlier, I'm thinking of doing a part two at some point where I can cover even more of these. I just didn't want to go on too long because it's after 9 o'clock right now, and I know people got to be getting to bed and things like that, and I've got to take care of my dog and give him his pill for the night. Um, yeah, Carnage, I think I'm in the same boat. It seems like every time there's a sale, I'm broke. Um, but I think I'm gonna tie this one up, um, and I hope you guys that were in here enjoyed this little excursion back in time to some of the highlights of my youth as far as horror television is concerned. And yeah, I hope to be doing a second one of these here shortly, hopefully. I hope to be able to give you more of a advance warning on that one. This was just something I decided just to do just for fun. But thank you everybody for stopping by, and thank you for anybody that watches this later. I really appreciate it, and I'll be